The Dee ferryboat disaster took place on Wednesday 5th April 1876, when the ferry taking passengers between Aberdeen City and Torry was swamped and 32 lives were lost. The day had been a holiday, as it was the half-yearly sacramental fast, when work was suspended in the city. The weather was spring-like and sunny, meaning many wanted to be outside to enjoy their extra day off. Torry was a draw for the working classes, and the quickest way to reach it was by ferry over a fairly newly formed channel of the River Dee. At this point, it was around 160 yards from one side to the other, but that day there was a strong current running towards the sea, thanks to the rapid thawing of snow from the mountains of Upper Deeside. As the day went on, the boatmen became concerned at its strength. The ferry belonged to Aberdeen Town Council and had been leased from 4th June 1875 for 3 years, with the tackman being Alexander Kennedy. In all the time the ferry had run this channel, no incidents had occurred, and the boat was fairly new, having been built by William Hall. She was a flat-bottomed 25 feet long cable ferry, but it had been flagged up by local fishermen that the hull was the wrong shape for the crossing. A new wire rope fixed on each bank of the river and passing along the length of the boat was put to the test like never before. About mid-afternoon, when the tide was at half ebb, the boatmen's skills were severely tested as they took passengers from the Torry side to Aberdeen. Little was done to prevent overcrowding, but this was difficult due to their excitement. Shortly after 3 o'clock, the boat left the Aberdeen side with 76 passengers, many of whom had boarded before the passengers from the other side had disembarked. During that crossing, the boatmen could feel the vessel being towed downstream by the current, although made the crossing quickly. Only one boatman was on board for this, its final run, although he was assisted by other passengers as it was pulled by the current. The wire ropes tightened to full capacity, and soon those on board realised it was in trouble. Those on the Torry side noticed that progress was slow, and that it sat just inches from the water, but as it neared the middle of the crossing, disaster struck. Panic had ensued, and the boat canted slightly on the west side, allowing water on board. Shouts for assistance were raised by the alarmed passengers, many of whom were now more or less getting submerged. As the water continued to rush in, a call was made to cut the rope, in hope it would free the boat from impending disaster. At the Torry side, the rope was loosened, but snapped, according to eyewitness Donald Sutherland, and this caused the boat to flip immediately over. Everyone on shore was appalled at what they were witnessing, but were pretty much helpless to give assistance. Several passengers were aware of what was about to happen, so jumped into the water before the boat capsized and made it safely to shore. They had had the advantage of being swept away by the current, then found themselves back at the upturned boat, which they clung to. At least 7 men saved their lives this way. Quickly, several small boats were launched to give assistance from both sides of the Dee to the men, women and children struggling in the water. At first, people were all in a knot, on the heads of each other, but the current soon swept them apart. Above the surface of the water, heads were visible along with wildly gesticulating arms of those now battling so fiercely for life. 4 boats left from the Tory side and 1 from the Aberdeen side, and with help from a second ferry boat, 30 people were rescued, all of whom were exhausted. Others made it to shore under their own steam. There were some miraculous rescues. A Tory fisherman, Alexander Craig, on the lookout for the return of his wife, noted just how full the boat was as people boarded. He called to her not to get on board, but either she didn't hear him or ignored his advice. Beside him was his father-in-law, Alexander Kay, who he told that it would never make it across, so they decided to immediately launch a boat and entered the water a little further downstream. Fortunately, they made it to midstream before disaster struck. It transpired she was impeded by a creel on her back, with a large number of people in the water trying to grab it. It looked like she would either be strangled or drowned, but her husband managed to catch hold of her just as she was going under the water and pulled her onto the boat. These 2 men went on to save around another 10 people. A little girl was saved by her father, who had fortunately heard her cries for help and saw her being swept out towards the sea. A woman was rescued in a similar way by a fisherman's wife on the Tory side, where she'd been dragged by the current. With her was her infant, whom she'd clung to in her arms. A lame man who used crutches jumped away from the vessel into the water and made his way to the Tory side. Realising he didn't have his crutch, he swam back to get it and managed to find it. By this time he was soaking, and the weight of the water made it difficult for him to get to shore. In the end, all he lost was his flute that he was taking with him to play. A 15-year-old boy on board tried to save his sister from drowning. Unfortunately, he missed her and brought another girl safely to shore instead. Just as he was within a few strokes of shore himself, he went under the water, most likely exhausted, and sank. A fisherman made a grab for him, but all he clasped in his hand was a boy's cap. James Brown, a mate on the schooner Speed, happened to be on the river in a pleasure boat with his wife and family at the time of the incident. Landing his family, and assisted by 2 fishermen, they managed to rescue a further 5 people. Some salmon fishermen in their cobbles also managed to save several lives. It was some time before the bodies were recovered and identification took place. The community rallied round those who'd lost their loved ones, and along with the city's public bodies, contributed well to the relief funds immediately set up to help the bereaved. Even Queen Victoria donated £50 towards it. A Board of Trade inquiry was held in front of Sheriff Comrie Thompson in Aberdeen, with Captain Harris of the Royal Navy conducting the inquiry. Numerous witnesses were called over the 4 days, and as a result, a new bridge, the Victoria Bridge, was built, making it safer and easier to cross the Dee. It was formally opened on 2nd July 1881. The youngest to die in the tragedy was William Robertson, aged 9, but most were teenagers or in their early 20s. The oldest person to lose their life was around 50 years old. He was married gasworks labourer John Mitchell from Tory. It was one of the darkest days in Aberdeen's history. If you enjoyed this episode of Scotland's History, please like, comment and subscribe. Until next time, thank you for watching.